This is your only one, correct?
Only one here. I have one other down in Petite.
So he's got several bee yards. In this bee yard, it's the only polystyrene. It is 4 deeps, so he's just going to take a look and see what the condition is in there. Oh boy, that's not looking good, is it?
It's dead.
It's dead. Any bees coming and going? That's just robbers?
Just robbers.
Yeah, it looks like you got a good number of wax moth.
Yeah. What we have, the problem we've had this year is we've lost a lot of queens for some reason. I really don't know why.
Oh boy, look at those wax moth larvae. They didn't like that light. All these are wax moth cocoons. And if you see the big fat worms, those are the larvae that's going to turn into the moth themselves. Or actually, the larva turns into the cocoons, and then the moth. There's a big fat larva worm right there.
So what I'm going to do is we will take this away from this apiary. We will split everything out. We will get rid of all the wax moths. The honey that's in there that's okay, we will recover the honey for future use, and any of the frames that I can save will be frozen to kill off any eggs that are in there. Alright, so that's disappointing.
You know, in my adventures of doing beekeeping and sharing that on YouTube, many times over the years, people have pointed out where I don't know something, and that's fine actually, because I love that feedback. In an effort to become a better beekeeper, I'm looking things up, I'm watching videos, I'm taking advantage of hanging out with beekeepers like Mr. Mark whenever my family time permits, so that I can get a different perspective and a view of the way other people are doing it, and then filter that through my own thoughts and take what I learned back to my own bee yard.
This was a cutout, a very small cutout, and we put it into a 5-frame nuke box. And then as it grew, we added another frame on top, another box on top. So it's 10 frames, and it's been there now for, I think the top box has been there for 3 weeks and the bottom box for 5 weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them into a 10-frame Langstroth hive.
So before you get too far into that, you pulled several bottom boards away from this side. Did you have them leaned up there to keep the sun off of this side?
That's right, yes. This hive is a bit far out in the sun, so to keep it cool, we put wood on the north and the west side to reduce the amount of sun in there, so it keeps the hive at a reasonable temperature. And the bees also want one wall that is cool enough so that they can condense the moisture in the air to keep the hive dry.
Do you know how many hives total you have in this bee yard? You can use your fingers if you want.
We have 17 hives in this
bee
yard.
Yeah. That's more than you have fingers.
It's more than fingers. Normally I like to keep around about 7 to 8 hives here, because I believe there's enough food for that. But because this is my nursery hive, there are times when I can get a lot more than that. This guy's not looking happy. So I thought these guys would have drawn this comb out. They've done nothing.
Do you think the colony is still viable?
Yes, they're full. The bottom's full. They just haven't moved up. What I'm thinking of doing of this is moving the whole hive into a cooler area. And it's latish in the afternoon, so most of the bees of that hive should be home. So I'm just going to check the pad over there, and that's where I'm going to move them to.
Beekeeping is ever changing. You just never know it all. And even Mark, who's been doing this for a while, has studied. He's a very intelligent man that does a lot of academic studies. Even he will tell you that there are certain things he doesn't know. He's learning, he does experiments.
So some of the concerns one should have when you're moving a hive is how far away from the original place it is, whether the bees are going to find it or not. So at this time in the afternoon, the bees are predominantly at home. I'm not too concerned that we'll lose very many of these bees.
Do you put any sort of sticks or grass or anything in front of the entrance?
Yes, I will
I think I'm aggravating this hive right here by standing in front of it. What's that?
Probably because I was trying to work out where the bees were coming from.
Yeah. The bees generally do not like my camera.
You see, it's full.
So they're happy, they're just not ready to grow up.
Yeah, just don't want to move. Alright.
They're Toys R Us kids. They never want to grow up. I know my bees don't like my camera. I guess it's all bees, of course. And so these right here, they don't like me standing in front of their hive, for one. No bees really do. And the camera just attracts them for whatever reason. The sounds it makes, or humming and buzzing.
But getting back to this hive, so we talked earlier on about these being feral bees, properly africanized, and they can become very defensive. Here we've moved a whole hive and we've had virtually no problem. And this is generally how I find my bees are in the late afternoon. So late afternoon they're usually very calm, except now that Blake is here.
Yeah.
And this is how I normally operate with them, about like this.
It's my vibe.
Your vibes. Okay.
Great, so next time you'll check to see if you need to put another box on there.
The answer probably is going to be no, because we don't have a nectar flow, so there's nothing for them to really build on. Although I've given them something to drink, I would anticipate that this hive is going to stay like this now right through winter and into the new year. It depends on what sort of honey flow we get in fall. If we get a strong flow in fall, we might be able to put this into a bigger box, but I really don't think so. I think it'll stay like this.
That's one of the things I love about hanging out with him, is that he's willing to share that knowledge and not have such a big ego saying, look at me, I'm the best beekeeper and I do it the right way. So I love how he does things, and I like that he's willing to share. Do you notice that the bees in this area get much off of the cedar pollen?
No.
I didn't think so either, just my experience. They tend to really love the mesquite flowers, but when cedar goes full of pollen, they don't seem to do much with it.
I don't see any evidence of cedar pollen in the hives. None at all. I don't smell it. I don't see the color in there. So I don't think they do it. I think they just leave it alone.
And you would expect, whenever our cedar trees are full of pollen, that they would have a pretty nice flow, but they don't.
Well, the bees don't deliberately go after pollen this time of the year. They're going after the nectar, and if there's pollen there, they pick it up. They will go after pollen in the beginning of spring or when they want to brood up. Now they're slowing down their brood. They have pollen already in this, so they're not deliberately going to look for pollen.
Right.
And the cedar trees, there's no nectar.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask that, so cedar has no nectar.
Yep.
Over here's the hive that we worked on in a previous video. I'm just going to take a peek at that one real quick. Still has the vacuum box on it, and so I think that's one thing that we're doing tonight, is putting a different box on top of there. Unless I'm wrong.
What we're doing here is preparing a super, 5-frame super for the swarm. All the frames, three of the frames are drawn comb, fully drawn comb, I've taken from another hive, and the last 2 are empty. So this is going to give them 3 more frames to start filling up, as well as 2 frames to start building on. And this sort of combination seems to be good for trying to encourage a swarm to take residence and start to build. Alright, let's go.
I notice you have the yellow plastic, wood, and black plastic in here. Do you have preferences?
Yes, and my answer today is different than what it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago I was trying to go for wood and wax foundation only. but practicality has stepped in. The yellow plastic is what they call the natural size, 4.9mm size, and having that in place, it makes it easy to spin out even in this heat. So when I'm doing extraction, it doesn't collapse on me. It's also hard for the wax moth to destroy it, and I can reuse it. So why have I got wood and black in there is because people give me frames or give me boxes, or they've given up with beekeeping and they pass the equipment on to me. So I've inherited a lot of frames from other people, some of them black, some of them wood, some of them white, and those that I can salvage I do and reuse. Now, because this is going to be in the honey super area of the hive, I'm not concerned about the cell size, although by preference I still want the 4.9 cell size, but the bees are going to fill it all up on their own, and maybe later on the 4.9mm can go down into the brood box, but all the larger cells will stay in the honey supers.
Mr. Mark has done a lot of research on small cell size for bees and the advantages of that, and how they can be better at keeping themselves clean, keeping the pest away, and there's just a lot of benefits to having the small cell size.
When one looks at small cell, the question is, why is it giving me the advantage? There are a couple reasons. First of all, instead of just having around about 4,000 bees on a frame, which is the standard 5.3mm, you've got over 7,000. So you have more bees to keep it clean, to keep the temperature correct and keep it dry. Secondly, the smaller the cell size, the faster the pupation. So these bees are pupating before the mites can become sexually mature. Are there mites in the hive? Quite likely, but they don't get sexually mature, so they don't multiply. And by keeping it that way, the bees are better off. Secondly is, the large bees, the European honeybee we have is a large size. That doesn't fly very far because of the sheer size of the bee. The smaller bees here have a much larger range. So the honeybee has a range of about 0.8 of a mile from the hive, whereas the small cell bees are between 7 and 10 miles from the hive. So they have a much larger area to forage, and hence they can live off a lot less food in this area. So that's why I prefer to go with the small cell bee.
Now this is the one you and I collected out from under the mobile home.
That's correct. So there's a couple still up here, not very many. I'm going to give it one bash. There we go.
Did they make it?
I think so. So we know that those frames are all brood, so we're adding in some empty frames on top here for nectar and honey and expansion should they require it. So there's that. You will put the lid on top there. So another question you might ask is, why have I got foam on top of the hives? There's a really good renowned beekeeper from Eastern Europe, a Russian, who talks about the hive and insulation on the hives. And there's also a beekeeper that wrote a book called, well, I have to think of it now, who talks about beekeeping in this area. And both of them say the most important insulation you have on your hive is the top board. So all my top boards are, I've got the 3/4 inch insulation on the top to help them with the heat and to keep it cool during summer and winter. Okay, I'm just going to get a feeder for this. Again, we're feeding this because the nectar flow has stopped, and we still want them to build up on this hive, both in terms of bee numbers as well as starting putting some reserves away.
I know the final task that Mr. Mark is going to do is taking this swarm trap right here that's full of bees. I can't even see it with my veil color. These bees have been, the 2 times I've been in this bee yard, these bees have acted like they don't like me. So they're going to really test my new veil. Before that, we have a few other tests, a few other tasks, and one of them is this hive here. What is it you're doing with this one?
We want to see whether they need a super in here, so we're just going to do a very quick inspection.
Someday, Mr. Mark, I'd like for you to visit my bee yard just to see the horizontal hives. I know that you use vertical Langstroth, and that's cool, but I'd be really interested in getting your opinion or your impression on the horizontal hives.
Sure. So we've got a nice bunch of bees up top here. They're all small bees.
When you open a hive and you're doing a quick, oh look, they're all heading in. You do a quick visual inspection for the health of the hive. What types of things are you looking for? Wing deformation and discoloration and things like that?
Yes, I'm looking for parasites, pests, dead bees, how excited the bees are, what is the color of the bees. So it's the general condition. Is the top clean? If the bees are healthy, the top is clean. If the top is not clean, there's something wrong. The bees are not healthy. So as I anticipated, they really could do with another layer, and I'm going to give them another layer. They're calm. So once again, this is the feral bee. They're nice and calm, which is what I'm generally used to. We're going to take this feeder out and put frames in here and put the feeder on top. So you always want the feeder as far away from the entrance as possible to reduce the probability of robbing. So we're going to give them, these are actually frames from a swarm that I didn't end up using. We'll put this on the top. Now some people will checkerboard, pull one frame up on the top, one frame down, etc. That does work. It's a really nice technique. I tend to use it in spring, but as the year progresses, I don't use it very often after that. Now once again, there's a lot of frames up here that have no comb on them. I need to encourage the bees to draw comb, and they need a nectar flow. Because we don't have a nectar flow, we have to artificially create one. And I do that with the feed.
And that's just pure white sugar, not organic or anything special, right?
It's white sugar with probably a pound of honey in it, and I think I made 6 gallons of it. It's got at least a pound of honey in there, and also I put some essential oils and some lipids in it.
And what are the lipids?
The lipids just help everything go into solution and make it easier for the bees to absorb.
And what type of lipids where do you get them? What are they? Because I've never heard of that.
I bought it about 3 years ago, and you use so little, I'd have to get the container out and have a look.
So it's a beekeeping product?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually a cooking product. It's used to emulsify fats and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And I use it to get all the stuff in solution for the bees. And they seem to like it, which is why I use it. So this is going to give the bees some more chimney effect on the hive, which will help them control the temperature. We put the top at an angle at the side, and then we jiggle it slowly close to give the bees enough chance to get out the way, so we don't squash too many bees.
How many of your hives have screened bottom boards?
I have 2 left.
And you're choosing not to use them?
That's correct. I'm phasing them out because originally the screen bottom boards were in to allow the varroa mites and the larvae from the hive beetles to fall through as a means of trying to control the mite and larvae levels in your hive. And then we thought here in Texas that would also help with the ventilation to keep the hives cool. Well, we've since learned that it doesn't help with ventilation. In fact, it's a disadvantage for ventilation. So 2 years ago, I set up 6 hives, batches of 2, right next to each other, about the same strength. One with screen bottom board, one without. And the ones without outperformed the screen bottom board ones hands down. There was just no comparison between them. So over this last year, I've been phasing out all my screen bottom boards.
I have found for myself too in my own bee yard that the screen bottom boards usually mean that the hives don't do as well, and it took me a while to figure out that potentially it was the screened bottom boards, but several beekeepers now have said that they believe that the hives need less ventilation, not more. So it's interesting to see Mr. Mark here with solid bottom boards, and the That's the direction I'm heading as well. Of course, you guys know I'm doing, I'm trying to work toward horizontal hives, and the horizontal hives that I have do not have any screen bottoms on them. This box that you're putting together has the thicker boards. This is 1.5 inch boards instead of 3/4 inch.
So it's made out of the 2-inch stud wood you use in roofs, because that wood has already been dried, so it doesn't shrink any further. But as you know, 2 inches mean as 1.5, so
right.
It's 1/2 thick. And I've noticed that all my hives that have the thicker wood perform better. They're more productive, they're much calmer than the ones with 3/4 inch. And so over a period of time I'll be putting more and more of these in the service. So the nice thing about my equipment is, to great intents and purposes, I've standardized on the deep. Everything is the same, except for now I'm introducing a thicker hive, but the internal dimensions are still exactly the same. So I can switch and paste between different hives, different combinations to get what I'm looking for. If you have more than one standard in your system, you're going to battle with doing that. For example, deeps and mediums or smalls or whatever else you have.
So true. I know.
The other thing you'll notice in these hives is I can get 9 frames plus a frame feeder in, whereas the traditional super you can't do that. You can get 8 in a frame feeder. I found that if I made my hives 1/4 inch wider, I can get 9 in the frame feeder. So that's what I've done, is that all my supers that I've made now are all 1/4 inch wider than the standard, which gives me 9 frames in this feeder.
I believe everyone has a story, and every story counts. I believe your story counts, because you count. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of your story, and for letting me be a part of yours. Hey, and Mark, thanks for letting me be a part of your story.
That's a pleasure. I love sharing.